How do you change the world for the better? There was one of the things that over the years on YouTube, one of the things that sort of developed around me was what they call the TLC. It doesn't stand for Tender Loving Channel, it doesn't stand for the Learning Channel. It stands for this network of communities online and channels that are sort of connected to me and happened because of what I did on YouTube. And it's a lot of people talking, and one of the things that they often do are live streams, and anyone can jump on the live stream and they just have a free-flowing conversation. And on December 30, they were doing a live stream, and Neil came to the Connecticut gathering. He lives in New Orleans. He grew up in New Jersey. He's now going to a Roman Catholic church. Zepp, he had a pizzeria in, what state was he in? But now he's a business manager. Max May over in the corner, she's new. I don't know much about her yet. Paul Allen used to work for the Federal Reserve and is a banker. Claire Kaw lives in the UK, we'll talk about her a little bit more. She promotes secular Quranism. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. She's an interesting character. And Sean is fairly new. He's a Latter-day Saint. And usually on these live streams, they can go for hours. People jump in and out, and they share their ideas, and they have this conversation. And on this conversation, as it often does, it whittled down into, what can we do about this world? Neil made a video recently called The Complete Idioms Guide to the TLC, where he sort of walked through things and really has everything to do with this little church in many ways. November 2017, I made a video about Jordan Peterson's biblical series. I did it over in the corner of my office. I had experience with video because of the Freddie and Paul show. And because I made that video, I started having conversations with strangers that eventually just got named randos on the internet, and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of conversations over the years, some of them recorded and shared, some of them recorded and not shared, some of them not even recorded. But pastorally, just all kinds of people in all kinds of places with all kinds of religions, most of them not going to church, not having a pastor, and just wanted someone to talk to and share their story with. And we began having conversations with each other, and this was a fairly early one. Jeff from Texas, and Job from the Netherlands, and Luke from Minnesota, and all sort of became other levels of leaders in this little online community. And we share life over the internet to a small degree. We talk about our stories, we talk about our fears, we talk about our hopes. And in January of 2018, we started the meetup here at Living Stones. You can recognize the stage. And people would come in the evening, and we would just talk. And you can see Rick there, and you can see Jared, and some of you might recognize some of the other people. And we talked and talked and talked. And some of those guys started a Discord server. Then we had thousands of people talking online. The Jordan Peterson meetups, we sort of sunset the Jordan Peterson stuff in 2020, and then that became Estuary. And so now there are 100+ Estuary groups all around the world, and we have ours at Sunday 9 a.m. here. And just this morning had a new guy come in from Carmichael named Chris. Never been here before. And it all started in this building. Talk, 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 talk. On that live stream, some of the people were complaining it's a common thing. All we do is talk. And it's like, okay, yeah, there's times to do other things, but sometimes we need to talk. So all what I started doing, people started copying what I was doing, and more channels started, and it began to be called a flotilla. Lots and lots of talk all over the internet, people from every walk of life, from nearly every continent in the world, all kinds of languages, talk, 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 talk. Hundreds of people making friends, having conversations, talking, representing thousands more who just lurk. They're watching the talk. They're listening to the talk. And every now and then, someone like Max May with the blue hair, she came out of the lurk and she starts showing up on live streams. Paul Allen this year started showing up on live streams. So more and more channels running live streams, small channels mostly, people finding them and joining and talking. And so Max May came out of the lurk, but it was a conversation not unlike many where people are anxious, just like Reggie expressed, anxious about the world, anxious about their lives, anxious about politics, anxious about the economy, anxious about their kids, anxious about their parents, anxious about their friends, anxious about themselves. Now, our capacity for creating habitable society, this particular podcast talked about, we're not transmitting it well to the next generation. People don't have friends. People aren't having babies. People aren't getting and staying married. People aren't getting together to build small groups. People don't know how to work, on and on and on. And good old Claire showed up, and Claire has the answer for everything. And the answer is found in the Quran. And the answer is found in the laws of the Quran, medieval Quranic law. Even though Claire, she lives in the UK, she's of Asian descent. I met her on one of my trips out there. She came to one of our meetups. And, women need to obey their husbands. Women need to obey men. But if a man shows up in the live stream and tells Claire she shouldn't talk, she doesn't listen to him. So I'm not quite sure she's really down for all these rules, but she promotes them pretty much any chance you get. An agnostic, atheist agnostic that believes if you instill medieval Quranic law, people will do better than the chaos and freedom of the West, even though she herself lives in London. And I understand her appeal, and right now that's very popular. A lot of people have a lot of faith in strong leaders who put down big rules and have firm discipline. There's a truth to that. The common answer is tell people what to do and make them do it. And recently I was talking to someone who was going on about this and how men need to be stronger leaders of the family. That sounds good. And their wives should listen to them. And I said, well, how are you going to make them? Well, they looked at me like, what? I said, well, what are you going to do if your wife doesn't listen to you? Are you going to divorce her? Well, no. Well, how are you going to make her? And then, of course, when the kids are little, you can sort of try to make them. And then they grow up and it's like, oh, you're not going to make them do anything. Tell people what to do and make them do it. It's not an unbiblical idea. Look at the Ten Commandments. Give them good laws and enforce them vigorously. It's not a new idea. Many of the laws are not that different from what Claire's medieval Quranic ideas are. C.S. Lewis, in the end of The Abolition of Man, had this list that he called it the Tao, which is common laws about culture, about really important things. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not lie in court. You shall not covet what your neighbor has. Those are good rules, and consistently enforced creates an orderly society. But they mostly get surface compliance where there's vigorous supervision because people cheat, people undermine, people revolt. So then what do you do if you really want to be a dictator? Well, now we have surveillance cameras, and now we have our phones reporting on us, and now we have social media where we can share our ideas. So if you have a central authority to observe people, maybe you have a social credit score, maybe you centralize everything and have a ruling group or maybe a strong man in charge. Government plans the economy and outproduces the rest of the world, flooding it with cheap consumer goods. That's China today. Authoritarianism has never really been tried. Really? Remember the Soviets? Most of us here in this room are old enough to remember the Soviet Union. Oh, they were so powerful and so strong and so impressive. And in the 1920s and 30s, everybody thought communism is the wave of the future. Now it just sort of looks kind of funny. The Chinese have their own take on it. They're the wave of the future. They've got better surveillance technology. If you go back and look at the Romans, it's all sort of the same. We just try it in new ways, and we have new technology. In the first century, it was the Roman way. Everybody knew that Rome had the best gods. Everybody knew that Rome had the best laws. In fact, many of our laws today descend from Roman law, just passed right through Western culture. Did that fix the world? A couple of weeks ago, we saw that John begins his story of Jesus with a hymn. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was in God's presence, and the Word was God. He was present with God in the beginning. Through him all things came into being, and apart from him not a thing came to be. That which had come to be in him was life, and this life was the light of men. For the light shines on in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. That Logos, that Word, created the world and makes it intelligible to us. That light that brings life into the world, that light shines in the darkness, and the darkness does not overcome it. And we saw last week the apocalyptic baptism. John the Baptist said the axe is laid at the root of the tree, and he's waiting for someone to come up and chop that tree down. And that tree for him was likely Rome and its Judean collaborators like the Herods, who were enforcing the Roman way on a Jewish people that wanted to be bent on all their old archaic laws instead of the new Roman ones. And John the Baptist hopes maybe he'll finally stop the chaos and the suffering and the frustration and the decay. The Messiah will come and set things right. The next day, John was there again with two of his disciples. When he saw Jesus passing by, he said, "Look, the Lamb of God." And last week we talked about the Lamb of God and the apocalyptic Lamb and the Paschal Lamb and the suffering Lamb. And I'm sure for John and his hardcore inner disciples, they heard John say this and they're like, it's happening. The Lamb has come. He's going to do it. And so what do you do if you're waiting for the Messiah? Then two disciples heard him say this and they followed Jesus. John was clear, I'm not the Messiah. There's the Lamb of God. So two guys who would probably always looking around for what was coming and how it was going to save. We're going to leave John the Baptist and now we're going to follow Jesus. John the Baptist had followers, groupies, disciples, early adopters, looking for the long-hoped change, frustrated with the politics of the day, wanting long-awaited divine intervention and finally fix the world, and they were ready for a new thing. And you can imagine their apocalyptic imaginations were filled with the kinds of things we tend to put in our movies. Angels coming down from the heavens, strictly enforcing God's law, bringing God's covenant. Finally, if Israel obeys the covenant, then the God of Israel will come and set Israel high on the mountain, and it will be a new Rome instead of the one that sits on 7 hills and worships all those pagan gods. When the two disciples heard him say this, they followed Jesus. Turning around, Jesus saw them following and asked, "What do you want?" Now, when you read the Bible and new characters are introduced, biblical scholars have learned to pay attention to their first words. And in the Gospel of John, these are Jesus' first words. And they're strange first words. You might imagine, if one of us were to write it, we need first words for Jesus. I am the Son of God, come to save you all. Or some big speech or something like that. The first words of Jesus, these would-be apostles following him, he turns around and says, "And what do you want?" And I would imagine if you were one of these disciples, you would have been a little taken by surprise. Because you've been listening to John the Baptist. The axe is laid at the root of the tree. Those of you who have 2 cloaks, share to those who have none. Roman soldiers, stop extorting people, and be content with your pay. All good lines that John the Baptist has said. Jesus turns around and says, and what do you want? And it's a strange way to start a conversation, but it's not an unreasonable one, because anyone starting to follow Jesus is looking for something. And they have in mind what they want. They might not be real clear on it, but something is motivating them. And it's a very reasonable question then, because, well, what do they want? What are they expecting? You know, AA has this great saying, expectations are preconceived resentments. That will likely be true for Judas. And if you search that, and now you can have these computers and Bible software and things, Jesus asks this question all the time to people. And it's a really interesting thing, because you would expect him to give you a rule or some wisdom or a daily tidbit or something like this in this world that is always throwing things at us. And in fact, when I think about why on earth a pastor in this church, when pretty much nobody outside of this church wanted to talk to me, now I have to limit the number of people I can talk to on the internet because they want something. And so if I'm going to have a conversation with them, well, what do you want? Because let's not waste either of our time. It starts with the individual and what we want. People only do anything if we're motivated, and that motivation comes from inside. Now, in a perfect orchard, we were given one rule about one tree, and what did we do? That tells us something about how we are. We think, yeah, rules are really good ideas, but I really want them enforced on everyone else. When I break the rule, well, I had a good reason. And nobody else does. Not like my reasons, but I have a good reason. There's something about us and rules. Rules are good, but they're insufficient. We want rules for others. And if we are good rule followers, we become self-righteous, and our relationships break down with each other. So rules are good. And what really people want from Jesus is for Jesus to be a rule enforcer, maybe with angels. When the two disciples heard him say this, they followed him. Turning around, Jesus saw them following and asked, "What do you want?" They said, "Rabbi," which means teacher. This is probably John writing this in Ephesus, perhaps. And so he had to keep explaining to the Greeks what the customs were down in Judea. "Where are you staying?" So he asked a question, "What do you want?" They ask another question, "Where are you staying?" Oh, this is the game we're playing. "Come," he replied, "and you will see." Do they really just want the tidbit of information about where he's staying? Or are they going to follow him? Are they going to watch him? Are they going to spend time with him? Are they going to see how he interacts with people? Are they going to try and they're fascinated by him, they're interested in him, they're infatuated with him. That's sort of the level of their relationship. Now they're going to watch him. So he says, "Come on, you can watch me. You will see. Will you just see where I'm living?" Oh no, they're going to see a whole lot more. So they went and saw where he was staying, and they spent the day with him. It was about 4 p.m. I love it when the Gospels do this. That pertains to the story. How exactly? This is the way someone talks who remembers something. Oh yeah, it was about 4 p.m. They stayed with him all day. And what do you think they did? They talked. Talk. They ate. They were just being together, and he was their master, and they wanted to see how he did things. They wanted to see his routines, his habits, his manners, his relationships, how he thinks, what he does. And they start to absorb, because people are way more caught than taught. All we do is talk. When are we going to do something? Yeah, things will be done, and lots of people have lots of ideas what everyone else should do. But remember, our main problems are motivation and rebellion. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, the old saying goes. And that begins with communion, life together. Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, was one of the two who heard that John had said and who had followed Jesus. The first thing Andrew did was to find his brother Simon and tell him, "We have found the Messiah, that is the Christ." Now, slowly these things grow, person by person, relationship of trust by relationship of trust. Why trust? Because remember, our two issues are motivation and rebellion. And in order to do something, we need to trust that it's going to be productive, and we need to trust in order to follow instead of rebel. Because without trust, nothing happens. Now, this last thing, we have found the Messiah, this is very tricky because in the next 3 years, one of the things Jesus is going to do is adjust their expectations on what that word means. And as we go through the gospel, as we've done many times before, I'm going to keep hammering on the issue with this word. He is going to redefine messiahship for them. And so Andrew brings Simon to Jesus. And Jesus looked at him and said, "You are Simon, son of John. You will be called Cephas," which then was translated as Peter. Now, this is really interesting because what we're going to see is that Jesus is going to do some things that is going to grab their attention early. He's going to know some things. He's going to predict some things. He's going to see some things, and people are going to begin to get the sense that this Jesus, they don't know what to do with him. And they're not going to know what to do with him for quite a while, but they're going to be interested and they're going to keep listening. Because we can't trust, we are fearful. And in these verses, Jesus will display his mastery over the created order in some subtle ways. But Peter isn't ready to know everything. So Jesus just gives him a little sample and says, Peter, that's what you're going to be. Now, Peter is probably expecting that he's going to be, or Jesus is going to be, or someone's going to be like a Roman soldier on a horse, being followed by commanders and legions and have power and be important politically and rule nations and overthrow empires. Images of world leadership, conquest, and ruler flood our imaginations because that's where we see power. Now, maybe within his own cultural frames, maybe some adjustments, maybe Jesus will ride a horse and Peter will be one of his lieutenants. Jesus is going to ride an animal, and it's not going to be a war horse, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. Peter will lead something in Rome. He will go to Rome. He will lead people in Rome. He will meet a man named Paul, and they'll become friends, and they'll have disagreements, and they'll write letters. And Jesus could say, you and Paul will be killed to scapegoat the sins of a very popular Roman Empire who was kind of a movie star, if they had movies back in the day, named Nero. He was a very big deal. He was an Olympian. And the thing about Nero was everything that Nero did was best. It's always the best, always the biggest. Just do a little searching about Nero. Quite a character. Peter, you'll be named Cephas, you'll be named Peter. You'll be the rock. You will go to Rome. You will build something. And they will hang you on a cross, and you'll ask to be crucified upside down. But you can't know that yet. I can't tell you that yet. Just a little thing. We're going to call you the rock, even though you're going to do some very flaky things. The next day, Jesus decided to leave for Galilee. Finding Philip, he said to him, "Follow me." Philip, like Andrew and Peter, was from the town of Bethsaida. Philip found Nathanael and told him, "We have found the one Moses wrote about in the law, about whom the prophets also wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." Did you ever have something you got really excited about and you told your friends and they said, no. You're the kind of person, and all of these first comers were probably the kind of people who would leave their boats and go down to the Jordan because John the Baptist is preaching big things and they can't get enough. They are motivated, world-changing people, and all of their friends are like, Peter, your fishing village, your fishing business would do a lot better if you would stay home and attend to the fishing rather than run down and follow every guru you find. So, I found a new YouTube channel. I found a new speaker. I found a new author. Nathanael's not going to be taken in. He says, "Nazareth, can anything good come from there?" Philip says, "Come and see." "All right, Philip, you're my friend. I'll go see the latest thing you're excited about." And when Jesus saw Nathanael approaching, he said to him, "Here is truly an Israelite in whom there is no deceit." These gurus, they got their little word tricks, their little Jedi mind tricks they're always pulling. "How do you know me?" Nathanael asked. Jesus said, "I saw you while you were still under the fig tree before Philip called you." "Oh, how could you know that? How did you know that? What does that mean?" Was Nathanael studying the Torah? Did Jesus just read him? Now, Nathanael is not listed in any names of the 12 disciples, but he becomes a disciple nevertheless. Then Philip declared, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." Now who's jumping the gun? Jesus said, "You believe because I did a little trick. You believe because I told you I saw you under the fig tree. You will see greater things than that." And he will. He then added, "Very truly I tell you, you will see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man." That's a strange verse. You can read commentaries and everybody's writing, what does this verse mean? Is this connected with the angels ascending and descending? Is this connected with Jacob's ladder? When will Nathanael, not mentioned in any of the lists of the 12, when will he see this? What does this mean? We'll have to come back to that. See, the thing is, the reason everybody goes on the internet and complains to the internet is that people are lost. And all of these people have a degree of lostness in them. And they have friends who are further lost still. They have brothers and sisters and parents and children who are in trouble with the law, or in trouble with alcohol, or do nothing but watch TV, or can't get a job, or are engaged for 18 years without ever getting married, or. And they look at the world and they read the news and they're anxious and they're worried and we have to do something. The world is a mess. Yeah, it is. It's always worse, it seems to us. It's always getting worse. Except if we're looking at something else, then everything's getting better. We go back and forth. That's what I talked about. Combinatorial focality. Depends on where you look, and there's infinite things to look at. But it's a mess, and it might all be falling apart. In fact, it probably is. It always does. And things are probably actually far worse than what you think it is. And, in fact, may very well get more painful. That's pretty common. In fact, even if there's no big war, even if there's no economic collapse, even if there's no environmental collapse, even if there's no political crisis, you know what? It is going to get worse. If you're lucky enough to grow old and weak and blind and deaf and lame, it always gets worse. Poor Carol. It got worse this morning. It wasn't raining when she left the house. It got worse. And yet, strangely enough, this Lamb of God will, even as his enemies imagine they're winning, and his friends imagine it's all falling apart, will draw a victory that no one can yet imagine out of the jaws of defeat. That's his story. Jesus will talk. He will tell them to do things. Rules are good. A new rule I give you. And they're thinking, okay, what's it going to be about? That you love one another. I really wanted a rule like always eat this for breakfast, or do these exercises. A new rule I give you, that you love one another. That's a horrible rule because there's no end to it. And you don't necessarily know how to do it. If you just say, always eat oatmeal and yogurt for breakfast, well, that's a rule I can do. Yeah, that's probably not a bad thing to eat for breakfast. But loving one another, that'll change the world. And yet we struggle. But why do we talk? Why do we puzzle? Why do we sit together? Why do we listen to each other? Why do we talk all the time? Even when we know most of us are really bad listeners. Why do we do it? We don't do it for money. We do it out of hope. We hope that maybe something good will be said and something good will be heard. We do it out of joy. We just keep talking. And we do some doing. We do that too. And we get to know each other. And that's a really good thing. And then we make friends. And that's a very good thing. Because friendship is really, really important. And one way to look at almost everything Jesus does, and we'll get there in the Gospel of John, is friendship. After the 3 years, Jesus will sit around and say, y'all call me master. You've been watching me for 3 years. We've been eating together. We've been having sleepovers. We've been walking around. You've seen a lot of miracles. You still get nervous and anxious, even though you've seen all these miracles because you have little faith. What we are finally is friends. We still have that today. What a friend we have in Jesus. We sing that. We make friends. And we often go much slower than our master because the disciple is not above the master. And we practice communion, which is really what we do on Sunday morning. And you might say, we only do this once a month, but actually we practice communion every time we get together. We see angels ascending and descending. Well, I don't see any angels. That's kind of what's happening when we're here at this table. We're ascending and descending. And the kingdom of God comes down from heaven, touches ground, and our prayers go up and back and forth. We do it. And we do it by sort of asking each other, well, what do you want? Well, I want everything. Well, that's good. I want everything better. Me too. Well, let's see if we can do it together. Let's see if we can become friends. Let's see if we can trust one another and see if we can grow. And of course, the whole thing starts out completely wrong because even when we get to this part of it, it begins with, on the night he was betrayed. And the thing is, you don't suffer betrayal from an enemy. You only suffer betrayal from a friend. And so right there in the story is the fact that in this world we will have trouble, which is exactly what he says. But be of good cheer because I have overcome the world, he says. So on the night he was betrayed, he didn't, if you knew Nathanael was under the fig tree, and if you knew where Peter was going, he certainly knew what Judas was going to do, and he told Judas, go and do it quickly. Let's not beat around the bush here. Let's get on with it. On the night he was betrayed, he took bread and he broke it. And they, of course, knew that he loved them because he had shown his love for them in many ways. They were also a little afraid of him because he would do things and say things that really scared them. And they weren't quite always sure what he was, like when he stilled the storm, but they had a sense that he did love them, and they knew they loved him. And so when he broke the bread, they really didn't understand that he was breaking the bread out of love. And then he said the strangest thing at their Passover meal. He said, "This is my body broken for you." And the Gospel of John says about this meal, he was about to show them the extent of his love. Now we know that this breaking of bread is pointing to that death on a cross. And the Gospel of John puts it all together and says, do you want to know what love looks like? It looks like what every child knows when their mom or their dad come in and they've been sick in their bed, and mom and dad picks them up and gives them a hug and cleans up the bed and puts them back down. It's love. Jesus said, I know it's not always going to feel like love, and we know this from our parents too. We don't always think our parents love us because they say things we don't like when we're small or even when we're big. But he says, I want to show you how much I love you. So I'm going to give my body for you, and it's going to be terrifying, and you think we're losing, and you're going to imagine that all of your time spent with me was wasted, and you're going to draw all kinds of conclusions. But in time, you'll see that I am right, and I do love you, and that you should keep following me.